This is, I think, the greatest Star Trek toy ever made in terms of playability, in terms of how much fun it is.
Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 86, recorded August 2023. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we talk with a Star Trek fan. We extract their fandom story and replicate a podcast out of it. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, episode 86. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter or Blue Sky at Trek Profiles. Spoiler warning, my humans, on this show, any episode of Star Trek may be discussed at any time. You have been warned. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the notably noxious, notoriously nosy, yet nonetheless nominal M5 Multitronic unit.
The M5 was ready.
M5, let's do some housekeeping.
Housekeeping information ready.
This is a 100% independent show. If you'd like to support us, the best way to do that is just to follow us wherever you are getting your audio. We are on all the major platforms, and your following us helps other Trek fans find us. This program is also 100% advertising free, and we don't have a supporters program or anything like that, but if you'd like to show some appreciation, I'd ask for your donation to our official charity here on the show. That's the Children's Fund for Glycogen Storage Disease. There's a link at trekprofiles.com/donate to give directly to the charity if you'd like to participate. I'd appreciate it so much. Thank you for considering it. There are some lightly edited outtakes and bonus material at the end of this episode. We got even more discussion on my guest collection and some Star Trek canon discourse in there, and you can enjoy that or not, as you choose. At the end of every interview, my guest faces my Kobayashi Maru lightning round. They get 5 terrible multiple-choice Star Trek questions, and they must give us their answers. And after each episode drops, I tweet those questions out as polls, where you can have your say. So let's look at the questions from episode 84 with Karen Nordine and see how it went. Which of these Badmirals is worse, Buenamigo or Pressman? Karen said Buenamigo, and the online people agreed by 85 to 15%. Which championship do we have tickets for? Parisi Squares or Onbo Jitsu? Once again, my guest and the poll people preferred the same answer, and it was the Squares by 57 to 43%. Worst way to go in the Star Trek universe? Getting turned into a geometric shape by Andromeda Galaxy aliens and crushed? Used as a Gorn breeding sack, or getting blasted with the Veron T disruptor? Karin said Gorn, and that was also the pick online with 72%. The Veron T disruptor got 16%, and being crushed by aliens was in last place with 12%. Which of these characters are you putting into your next holodeck adventure? Barclay, Neelix, or Peanut Hamper? In this one, both my guest and the online poll were aligned around Barclay, who got 50% in the poll. Neelix got 37%, and Peanut Hamper got 13%. What's up with those people who pick Peanut Hamper? That's weird. Which of these societies is worse? Majalis, Aurelius Colony, or Kajitar? My guest said Majalis, and she went 5 for 5 in this poll, with the online people agreeing with her every answer. Majalis got 60%, and the other two getting 20 apiece. Now, if you enjoyed those questions and would like to take a stab at writing your own for possible inclusion in the show, send them to me at feedback@trekprofiles.com or DM me on Twitter. And in fact, some of the questions in this very episode were written by listener Adam Saunders. I thank Adam for his contributions. And I got a little bit of errata for you. For some reason in this episode, I was talking about the Kzinti, so you can guess there's going to be a TAS reference somewhere. And for some reason, I meant to say vertical ribs, but for some reason I said horizontal. Not sure why I said that. I regret the error. Okay, that's it for housekeeping. Let's get to it. M5, start the show.
Transmission commences.
His favorite character is that OG Captain Kirk. He also loves Daystrom, Decker, and Balog too. His favorite ship is the classic TOS 1701. He is from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, North America, Earth, and Sector 001. It's the big-time Star Trek collector, Peter Wolchak. Welcome, Peter, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, John. I'm thrilled to be here.
Peter, are you a Star Trek fan?
I am a lifelong Star Trek fan. It is part of who I am.
So when you say lifelong, when does that begin? Are you one of these people that you can't remember a time you weren't into Star Trek?
Yeah, I mean, basically, apparently when I was really little, my dad would watch Star Trek. He was never a big fan, but he would watch it. And apparently when I was really little, I would enjoy the episodes. When I was about 9, is when I remember identifying Star Trek as a thing and then pursuing it. So I sort of date my fandom from watching an episode, and I have no idea what episode it was. I wish I remembered. Watching an episode and then going and finding the local TV guide and going through with a pen and looking for Star Trek and being absolutely thrilled that it was on a bunch of times a week. So I was 9 years old. That's when I think of my fandom starting. So basically, as long as I've been old enough to actually appreciate and pursue a piece of media, I've been a fan since then. So I consider that sort of, lifelong, basically.
When your dad was watching Star Trek, was that in original broadcast or was that in syndication afterwards?
No, he watched it in original broadcast on and off. And again, never pursued it, but would watch it if it was on. For me, I'm the syndication generation. So when I talk about being 9 years old, that was 1977. So that's why when I went to look for it, it was on a bunch of times. I believe at that time in Toronto, there were 2 stations that were carrying it. So it would be on 3, 4, 5 times a week. And if I was home, this is before VCRs, guys, if I was home, I was watching Star Trek. And I hated when anyone talked to me during Star Trek. That always drove me nuts, right? Really important. Shush, I'm watching Star Trek.
Yeah, you can't be disturbed when Star Trek's on, right? It's not like today when everybody has a pause button on everything and you can pick up and put down. I mean, when there was broadcast TV, you had to be locked in.
Well, and I think a lot of people in the syndication generation can recognize this. What happened was they would cut the episodes up because they wanted to fit more commercials in. So when we finally did get a VCR and I started to record the episodes, I would have very neat labels on the tapes with the episode name written down, and before each episode, just physically at the beginning of where I would write it down, I put a little square, and if the episode trailer, if the teaser was included, I'd put a little check mark, because in Toronto anyway, the stations decided that the easiest way to cram more commercials in was simply cut out the teaser. So in an episode like The Empath, you had no idea what was happening because you didn't see the setup and you didn't see them disappear. And it was a couple of years after I started watching really, really seriously that The Empath was on, and they actually ran the trailer. And I thought for a minute that this was an episode of Star Trek I had never seen, because for years, watching the show as much as I could, I had never seen the teaser. And it was amazing. For a minute and a half, I thought it was a new episode of Star Trek. It was therefore a revelation when you first started to get home media and you could see the entire episode. That was amazing to me, because there was always the scenes that got cut out. And so it was like a little bit of new Star Trek after being a fan for years.
So you were doing the taping, sort of the homebrew tape VCR solution. Yeah. Then did you sign up for like the send the VHS tapes to my house kind of thing, or what happened?
No, I couldn't afford it. I could not afford the VHS, and I could not afford the first round of DVDs. I didn't have a lot of money to spend on Star Trek when I was young. My parents, I think, wanted me to understand the value of money, and so they didn't give me a lot. I didn't get really an allowance or anything. So it wasn't until I started working as a teenager that I had my own money to spend. But I did not get Star Trek on home media until, like, the episodes. I had the movies on tape, like purchased tape when they dropped. I think Star Trek II, famously was was one of the first movies on VHS that was actually affordable by the common people. I think it's $40, I think, at the time. It was Star Trek and Star Trek II and one other movie that were inexpensive. But I didn't.
I remember videotapes being like $89, $90, $100 for a movie on VHS.
Well, yeah,
from the store.
Yeah, and so I believe it was The Wrath of Khan. There was 2. The other one was something like An Officer and a Gentleman, but I don't think it was but it was a movie like that anyway. Paramount brought them out, and I'm pretty sure they were $40 each, and that was considered hugely cheap, right? I bought the first DVD sets that were in. I'm looking at it over there in the corner of my room now. That were the yellow, blue, and red plastic packages for each season. Those are the first home media episodes that I owned, and I also have in my Star Trek room here a VHS display for when the movies were out on video cassette. and they were $14.95 for 2 episodes back whenever Star Trek video cassettes came out.
So you kept the video cassettes?
I have a couple, but I have a store display. One of the more unusual things in my collection. It's about it's a little bit more than 6 feet tall. It's a big cardboard display. It takes up a lot of room in my Star Trek room. But just because very few people have it, I've kept it up, and I have a few of the cassettes in there just for display purposes to make it look like a store, a little bit like a store. And I have another one of those display cases in a box. So I actually own 2 of them. One of them is in an unopened box, and those ones are actually worth a fair bit of money. I really should sell them one day and buy something maybe a bit more interesting. But yeah, $14.95 at one time.
So let's go through it chronologically. So when animated series came out, did you watch that live, or was that something you came to later?
No, I somehow largely missed. Well, yeah, I mean, the end when it was on initially, I wasn't old enough to watch it. As I said, really wasn't until about 77, and the animated series was sort of this. It was like a unicorn for me for a number of years because it wasn't on all that much, and so I knew it existed. For me, the animated series existed as the Star Trek log adaptations that Alan Dean Foster wrote. I owned all those and I read them. Again, I'm looking at them right now. I'm on the shelf across from me. So both the actual episodes in the James Blish adaptation and the Star Trek animateds in the Alan Dean Foster adaptations, I knew the episodes better as written stories than I did as televised stories, because you could pick up a book and read it anytime. You couldn't pop a disc in and read it and watch it anytime. So, the interesting thing, of course, is a lot of those books have stuff in them that either is different from the episode or is in addition to the episode.
Right.
The Star Trek logs were sold so well that he was asked to start expanding them. So the early volumes have a number of episodes in them. By the time you get to the end of the run, there's, I think, 1 episode in the last one, because he was running out of ones to adapt, and the publisher was like, "These are selling so well, please give us more." So he had to take a 23-minute script and expand it to sort of a novella type length. So there's a lot of stuff in there that's not on the TV, that's not in the episode. Same thing with the James Blish. I mean, if you read Who Mourns for Adonais, if you read the James Blish version of that, Carolyn Palamas is pregnant at the end by Apollo, because that's what it was in the script that Blish had. And then, of course, they changed that for the actual filmed episode, and I believe never shot that scene. Similarly, in Operation Annihilate, the story is very different in Operation Annihilate. They go back, they track the planet that the creatures are from, and wipe it out. They don't just kill the creatures on Deneva, they kill the creatures on their home planet in the Blish book. So it was a very weird experience sometime in the 70s watching an episode on TV and thinking, well, no, wait a minute, that's not what happens. Whereas, of course, what happens on TV is what happens. The Blish books are the ones that are different. But I knew the episodes better in a written format.
We are the same in that regard, Peter.
Okay.
My first introduction to animated series was also the Alan Dean Foster books. And I'll never forget the description of the Kzinti in the Alan Dean Foster books. And it was very evocative. They talks about the horizontal rib cages and like all this kind of stuff that they have. And they sounded so terrifying. And when I first saw the animated series episode, I was like, those guys? Like, the book was so much better. Yeah. I was like, it was really a letdown for me in a lot of ways, because Alan Dean Foster's books were so good. And that was my introduction to the animated series, was the same as you, through the book.
Well,
and Blish always gets a good credit too. His stuff
is fantastic. The Kzinti are really the best Alan Dean Foster story, because he was so intimidated by having to rework one of his heroes. He was very worried about this, that Niven would object. So I think that's one of the reasons his story about the Kzinti is so strong, because he respected Niven so much. So he put a lot into the book. And then you're right, on TV, they're wearing pink and they're sort of hunched over and they're not that scary, really. or that bright, frankly,
Yeah.
in the animated episode, right?
Yeah, but in the book, they're terrifying. And so, for those who don't know, the Kzinti were not invented in Star Trek. It comes from the author Larry Niven, and somehow they got the rights cleared or whatever to put that into a Star Trek episode. So the Kzinti are actually not a Star Trek invention; they came from something else. And it was really nice to see them get a shout out in Star Trek Picard too. I think in the episode Nepenthe, there's a reference to the fact that the Kzinti are causing trouble in the sector or something like that. So I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we move on to TNG coming out in the 80s, and I assume that you were watching that as it came out.
I was glued to and like a lot of people, I was torn a little bit about TNG. You'd go to conventions and you'd see people wearing, Star Trek classic T-shirts. Who needs the next generation? I didn't feel that way, but I was concerned that it wouldn't be good, because I just really wanted it to be good. Like I was thrilled. You and I and a lot of people listening to this went through the 70s where there was no new Star Trek, basically.
Right.
And you were desperate for anything that said Star Trek. And then you get then you get the movies, you get the first few movies, and those are great, but you got to wait 2 years between them. Suddenly the idea of having weekly Star Trek, my God, this was the greatest idea. Thank goodness we're finally getting Star Trek back, because I also think that TV is Star Trek's natural medium. We can talk about that maybe later. And then I watched Encounter at Farpoint, and I really didn't like it. And I so wanted to. Like, I wanted to love Encounter at Farpoint, but I found Picard unlikable. I found the writing and the portrayal of our new captain. He just wasn't likable. But I watched every week, never missed it, recorded them on VHS, and grew to really love TNG. So yeah, I watched every episode as they came out.
Wonderful. And of course, TNG led directly into several other shows. So we had Deep Space Nine after that, and then Voyager, and then Enterprise. Did you stay up with all the new shows as they came out and watch them?
No, like a lot of people in the early 90s to the early 2000s, my career was taking off. I was really pushing for promotions. I was working a lot. And my wife and I had our two daughters in 97 and 2000. So I stopped watching Star Trek. I would catch it here and there, but life was just too busy. Also, we were moving, so I didn't have a Star Trek room like I have now. So I did, just through circumstance, not through preference, but just through circumstance, I drifted away from Star Trek, came back to it in the early 2000s, watched Enterprise from episode 1 and really, really liked it, and watched Deep Space Nine as soon as I was able to, actually sit down and watch it. Very much enjoyed it. Got into Deep Space Nine right away after all the...
Was that on DVD or some other way?
That's a really good question, John. I have no idea how I watched it back in the day. I think it was on TV and I was recording it, but honestly...
Okay.
I could be wrong. This was many years ago.
That's okay.
And so I got into Deep Space Nine, really liked it. Voyager, I'm not to this day a fan of Voyager. In the sort of classic Trek era, which is TOS to Enterprise, Voyager is my least favorite. I rush to add that it's not because of the female captain. I'm thrilled that Star Trek finally had a female captain, and Janeway and the actor who portrays her are the best part of Voyager. So like I think Janeway's a great character. I just don't much like the rest of the show. There are some great episodes in Voyager, of course. It's on for 7 years. There's some great episodes. It gets really good at the end. Last few seasons are really good. But it wasn't until maybe 3 years ago that I finished my first watch of Voyager, and then I've now watched it again since. So I've seen Voyager through twice. I have seen every episode, every movie that says Star Trek on it. It's important to me to see all of it. So I have seen every bit of Star Trek. I will continue to do that with the new Star Trek. A lot of it I'll probably only watch once. There's a fair bit of Star Trek I won't go back and rewatch, having seen it once. But I'm a completist. I'm a completist in my collecting, and I'm a completist in my viewing. I wouldn't watch part of a series. I have to watch the whole series.
So when it comes to watching Star Trek today, are you a disciplined rewatcher, or do you like to pick and choose, or what do you do?
No,
When you're just in the mood for Star Trek, what happens?
yeah, no, so with the original series, I watch episodes as they strike me. So it's something that I think about and I want to watch the scene again, or maybe I'm writing something and I want to go back. So with the original series, it's haphazard. With the other ones, it's pretty disciplined. Like I start at the beginning and I watch it through. I need to do a TNG rewatch. As much as I love TNG, it's probably the one that is definitely of the classic series. It's the one I haven't watched in the longest, which makes no sense because I really like it. So I have to sit down and actually watch TNG, and I will suffer through the first season and a half because I have to see every episode again. Because as I say, I'm a completist.
Right on, right on. And so it seems like Star Trek for you has been mostly a solo activity. I mean, it sounds like there was a little bit with your dad at the beginning, but now it's pretty much just you. I mean, are your daughters watching it, your spouse watching it, or is it just a Peter thing?
No, my daughters and my wife have no interest in Star Trek at all, and my wife, furthermore, like I'm a Star Trek collector, and she has no idea why I do that, or indeed why anybody would collect anything at all. She, if she had her way, she would live in a small apartment or a small house with very minimal furniture and one cat. She's a minimalist, but luckily for me, she's very supportive. So I have a really large chunk of our basement is devoted to my Star Trek room, and I have shelves and walls, and like I can't put anything else up on my walls because I have no room left, in my Star Trek room. So my family has no interest in Star Trek whatsoever, but luckily they're accepting of my obsession. I growing up, I didn't really have friends who liked Star Trek, but luckily as an adult, I have two good friends here in Toronto who are both big Star Trek fans, and like a lot of us, I have a community online of like-minded. I love talking to knowledgeable Star Trek fans. Like it's so great exchanging information, exchanging opinions, trivia, all that stuff, right?
Yeah, it's great.
Which is what we're doing.
Yeah, well, you were looking for knowledgeable Star Trek fans, and unfortunately, you're stuck with me, so we're going to have to make do as best we can.
Sure.
Have you ever worn a cosplay or a Star Trek uniform?
No, I have a lot of respect for people who do cosplay, especially people who do the obscure cosplay. Like I love that, right? Like people who come up, pull a background character or something. But no, I'm not at all skilled in that way, and it's just never been part of my fandom. But I have a lot of respect for people who do cosplay.
So, all right, let's talk about two related issues, and I'm not sure which one we want to talk about first. So I guess I'll ask you, which came first in your Star Trek fandom experience? Did you go to a convention first, or did you start collecting things first?
I started collecting first, but I didn't think of it as collecting. So again, there was so little Star Trek that I first went to my local library and I flipped through all the science fiction paperbacks looking for any book that said Star Trek. I'd heard somewhere in those pre-internet days that there were Star Trek novels, and I was blown away by this concept because there's more Star Trek out there.
Yeah.
So I flipped through. I have a very clear memory of like literally flipping through the stacks looking for a novel that said Star Trek on it, and then there were three science fiction stores in Toronto along Queen Street West. It was a great time in terms of science fiction retail in Toronto because there were these three stores. They were all a couple of blocks away. And I went down and I bought a couple things at Bacca, which was one of the stores. I bought David Gerrold's World of Star Trek that he had autographed. I bought Bijou Trimble's Concordance. I bought The Making of Star Trek by Stephen Whitfield, Stephen Poe. And that, looking back, was the beginning of my Star Trek collection. But I didn't know that I was becoming a collector. I just wanted to experience more Star Trek. And then,
about how old were you at this time?
I would have been about 12. So I had a friend.
So you started with some books.
Started with books. Books were my gateway drug, 100%. Because, I mean, first of all, there wasn't much else out there. Like, I spent years trying to find the Star Trek blueprints. That's another good collector story. But
Oh yeah.
initially it was the books, any book that said Star Trek on the cover, and then there was a local science fiction convention called Ad Astra, annual science fiction convention that started in either 80 or 80. Started in 80, and I saw it advertised, I think, at BACA at the bookstore. And so I went to that in either 1980 or 1982. So I would have been either 12 or 14 at my first sci-fi convention. And I have, again, it's a very clear memory of walking into the dealer's room. I didn't even know what a dealer's room was. And I walked in and there was stuff to buy. Like, this was amazing. And it was a small fan run general sci-fi convention, but there was some Star Trek stuff there. And that, I think, is when I became a collector, because I realized that there was this wider world of merchandise. There was all this stuff that you could buy. And so that's when I became a collector. But I think the reality for me is I would probably, if Star Trek didn't exist, I would probably collect something else. So my fandom is sort of divided in half. The first half is a love for the stories and the characters. And the second half is I enjoy collecting. I enjoy the process of learning about collectibles, of chasing them, finding a obscure thing in a box at a convention that you don't own. That's so much fun to me. So I would probably be a collector even if Star Trek didn't exist.
One of the reasons I didn't know where to begin with
Yeah.
this is because those of us who were around in the 70s, which I was, it's hard for people who are younger in fandom today to really understand how it was back at the time. Because today you just go on Amazon or you go on Etsy or you go to Alibaba or eBay, and there's like all this stuff you can buy. I mean, there was nothing to buy. There was no online anything. No. And so you would go to these conventions where people would have all this homebrew stuff. Yeah. And it was all stuff they made. Uniforms and ships and models, and there were model kits, but I mean, just all kinds of stuff. And so conventions were really where you went to get that stuff, So that was my question for you, was like, is it a chicken or an egg thing, And so it sounds like you started with the books, then you started going to the conventions, and you started buying other stuff. So you started with books. What did you move into next?
Yeah, well, I mean, literally anything. I mean, as you just said, there wasn't much. So mostly what there was books, and there was a company called Langley and Associates that made 8x10s. So they would get transparencies, usually from Lincoln Enterprises, from Gene Roddenberry's company. People would buy film clips, and you could, if you either knew what you were doing, or you could go to a company and you could make prints from those film clips. You'd make a negative and then use the negative to make a positive print. So I remember, again, being at early conventions, and there would just be tables full of photos. And again, if you're 20 years old now and you're listening to this and you're like, why would you spend $5 or $6, which is about what they were in the 80s each? Why would you spend $5 or $6 to buy a photo? Well, it's because we didn't have photos. When the photo novels came out, so there was a series of 12 photo novels that were produced in the 70s. And so there's 12 photo novels, 12 episodes, and it's like a comic book, but with photographs. And those were amazing because you could actually look at the bridge. You could look at a scene for more than a second as it was on screen, because you couldn't pause the TV. So things like
I had the TMP one.
Yeah, of course. And it's gorgeous, the TMP one. And then they came out with the Wrath of Khan one, which is horrible, which is contrasty and black and white and yucky. But the TMP one is lovely because they merchandise the heck out of TMP. There's a lot of motion picture merchandise because it was the first one, because it was a big budget, Anyway, so conventions had books and they had photos. The first sort of pricey thing I bought was the card set that was produced, I believe it was 76, and it's a color card series. It was the first sort of official widespread set of Star Trek cards. There was an earlier card set that nobody has that was made in black and white and was pulled because the company that made it never got the license for it, the Leaf cards. But the first expensive purchase I made as a kid was the 76 color cards, and I still have them, and they're worth, I think I paid about $40, and they're worth, I don't know. I don't sell my stuff, so they're worth hundreds, if not thousands today, probably hundreds. They're in excellent shape. So that was the first expensive thing I bought.
What's the item you have searched for the longest that you successfully got? What was the white whale, Captain Ahab?
There's an old story and a new story. The old story, I mentioned this earlier, is the Star Trek blueprints, the Franz Joseph Star Trek blueprints. A lot of people will know these.
Are those the one that came in the pouch?
I was going to say they came in the pouch. They originally retailed for either $5 or $6. I'm looking because they're over there. I now own 3 of them. But when I was a kid, when I was a young, like sort of from 12 to 16 or 17, I looked everywhere for these things. Nobody had them. There was no eBay. Every time I used to go to used bookstores. I used to, if my family for a day trip or whatever went to a nearby town, on just a family day trip to go do something, I would always look up. We would get there, and I would look up in the phone book, a local phone book, to see if there was a science fiction or a used bookstore. And my parents, who were lovely people, still are, would drive me over as part of our family day trip, and I would look. And one of the things I would look for in the bookstore was the Franz Joseph blueprints. I'd heard about them, I'd never seen them, and then one time, sort of my mid-teens, maybe a little bit later, my dad had a job briefly in Florida. He was working part-time. He was an engineer, and he was working in Fort Lauderdale. And so my mom and I flew down to join him. And the first thing I did when I got into the hotel room was grab the phone book, and I looked.
Oh, sure.
And I found there was a couple used bookstores, one comic book shop and a couple used bookstores. And my mom, again, being a lovely person, the next day got in the rental car with a map, and we drove around. Anyway, the story's taking too long. I walked in, and one of the first things I saw in this used bookstore was the Franz Joseph blueprints. And they were $8. I remember they were $8, and I was so excited. And my mom, being savvy, sort of put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Shh, don't if you make a
Be cool.
If you make a big deal,
cool.
They'll charge more." So I was so excited. I had my own money. I paid the $8, went out, and I sat in the backseat of the car and very carefully opened and looked at those blueprints. That was my white whale when I was a kid. Now,
well, hold on. Let me ask some questions first. How would you describe the condition of the blueprints when you bought them?
Oh, they were actually excellent and still are. The plastic was intact on the pouch. Honestly, I wonder if anybody had even really looked at them. I think maybe they had just been store stock from the beginning and nobody had bought them.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they were in a corner of a used bookstore. It wasn't even a science fiction store or a comic book store. It was a used bookstore. And it was so thrilling to me to, like, I can't, my little collector heart, I can't describe how important it was to find those, And I have 2 more now just because I wanted to rescue them. When I would go to a store as an adult or a convention and there was a set of blueprints and you could tell nobody wanted them, I'd buy them just to give them a home.
And what are they blueprints of?
There's exterior views of the Enterprise. So there's the side view, the top view, the bottom view, and they're labeled blueprints. So you can see where the phasers, well, you can see where Franz Joseph put things. They're not entirely accurate. There's the bridge, there's crew quarters, sick bay. There's a sort of a deck by deck breakdown. If you've ever seen the Franz Joseph technical manual, which was sort of a Bible to me when I was a kid, it was, that was hugely important as well. It's like the technical manual, but on a bigger scale, and there's far fewer diagrams, of course, because it's, I think, a set of 12 sheets, and they're these long rectangular sheets. I've been meaning to write about these for my site. There's so many collectibles. I have a huge list of collectibles I want to write about. The blueprints are one of them, partly just because of the story, because they really mattered to young me, and I still love them to this day.
So what's the new story? The
new story is I can never imagine owning a screen used prop. They're ridiculously expensive from the original series. I only collect original series. That's a decision I made a long time ago, and I've stuck with it. And it was a good decision because otherwise, like, I have a ridiculous amount of stuff now. If I collected all of Star Trek, it would be out of control. So I can't afford a screen used prop, and also there's all kinds of authenticity issues. You have to really know what you're doing to buy to bid on a screen used prop or to buy it off of eBay or whatever. So I can't afford that. That's sort of a write off to me. But my two of my Star Trek heroes are Hua Chang and Matt Jeffries. So Hua Chang was a prop designer and a model maker in Hollywood. He was not part of the union, so he's never credited as part of the Star Trek production staff, but he designed the Romulan ship. He designed the tricorder. He designed the phaser rifle. And the reason for that is he was a lot cheaper. The producers could go out to him and literally pay him cash, no receipt, do this work for us. We'll give you some cash. You give us the prop. And of course, Matt Jeffries designed the Enterprise and designed all the sets and designed engineering and sickbay and the captain's quarters. The look of Star Trek is mostly because of Matt Jeffries, also because of Fred Phillips, also because of Irving Feinberg, who was the prop master for the original series. But Jeffries is the one who really, he designed the Enterprise. So those two guys, anything directly related to them is paramount to me right now. I would love to have one of Jeffries' original set drawings. He would sketch out all of his sets and he signed them all, which I always thought was a bit odd because they were his own copies, but he would always write his name on the bottom. He had a very distinctive signature. I have some original Hua Chang photos that were like literally taken in his backyard of the Romulan model, the Romulan ship model. I have Matt Jeffries' signature on the official trading card, but anybody with a visa can get that. And I have a number of his signatures on personal correspondence. He had a friend named Effie who moved from California to Australia, and they maintained a correspondence. And I have some of that correspondence. So I have his autograph, but it's not really related to Star Trek. It's not something he created. I mean, the drawings that he created that have his name on them, those you can look at the drawing and you can look at the set on your TV, and it's a direct one-to-one correlation. He designed the shuttlecraft, he designed the Klingon ship. So I would love to have something directly related to him and to Star Trek. Matt Jeffries is an unsung hero.
Do you buy replicas at all, or are you just looking for original stuff?
I have people that I know in the larger Star Trek collector community who have sent me wonderful scans of the Jeffries artwork. I probably have, 50 or 60 high quality scans of his drawings. And you can make a nice print of that, and put it on the wall. But it's nice to have the scans because you can look at them. But if you want something to put on the wall, it has to have been done by Jeffries. I have the master replica. I think they're master replicas, right? I'm suddenly blanking.
Master replicas?
I have the tricorder and the communicator made by master replicas. I have a lot of the Eagle Moss ships, which I love. One of the things that I love that Eagle Moss did was they did the Cage Enterprise. They did the Ring ship, which was one of Matt Jeffries' drawings, his initial designs of the Enterprise. You saw the Ring ship on the wall in the motion picture. And also,
yep, sure did.
And also in Archer's cabin aboard Enterprise, you saw a drawing of the Ring ship. So it's canon. I have that model on my shelf. I also have the model of his original shuttlecraft design. So for the original series, his original design was much more elaborate, and it was very curved. It was much more beautiful than what we got, but it was too expensive to build. So if you look at the model of the Galileo that was built for the show, you can see that it's based on 4x8 sheets of plywood. Like that's literally the shape. Some of the dimensions are based on sheets of plywood because it was cheaper to build. So Eagle Moss a number of years ago came out with, unfortunately, it's just a small one, but a model of the Galileo as Jeffries envisioned it. That's one of my favorite things because it's just so cool to see what he envisioned. And again, I've got the drawing. I've got a scan of the drawing of that model. It's very cool.
What's the item in your collection, if we haven't talked about it already, that you are most proud of?
You asked earlier about what items I were like a white whale. One of the ones that was a big deal, I sent you a photo of this, was my Mego Enterprise playset. This is, I think, the greatest Star Trek toy ever made in terms of playability, in terms of how much fun it is. I sent you a photo of mine, but because it's a toy, because it was made as a toy, they tend to be in really crummy shape, or they tend to have ended up in landfills because kids played with them. So
Right.
mine is in very good shape. I love that unreservedly, the Mego playset, and I have all the original, the first run of the Mego action figures in the original 1970s versions to go with the playset. And I built a little display area around that. I sent you a photo of that.
Yep, I have it.
I love that. I have some things that are relatively mundane, but they have great stories. So the way I build my main Star Trek site is that I tell the stories behind my best collectibles, rather than it just being a catalog of here's so and so's autograph. So on the wall behind me is the Ebony magazine that Nichelle Nichols was on the cover of in the 60s. This was hugely important to her because she was still relatively early in her career, had not had a huge amount of publicity, and Ebony was hugely important to the Black community in the 60s. So Ebony came and did a photo shoot on the set of Star Trek, and
I remember the photo. It's where she's climbing up the ladder.
That's right. Yeah, she's in the Jeffries tube, and inside the magazine there's a bunch of photos from the set. You can find them online, or I actually wrote an article about this. It's on my site as well. Because I knew the story, so at a certain point, if you're a Star Trek collector and you go to conventions, you have everybody's 8x10. You have all the main 8x10s. I always say to people who ask for advice on starting an autograph collection, I always say start with 8x10s for two reasons. One is they're cheap to buy, and two, they're easy to display, and they look great. So you can have a wall of 8x10s and it looks great. I have that.
And they're easy to store too.
They're easy to store. Like they're just always start with 8x10s, because people, I think a lot of people who are trying to get into collecting, they want something exciting. So they'll have like a model of the Enterprise. Well, signatures usually look crummy on a model because the model is uneven. It's not designed to take ink. It's designed, in fact, to be sort of sealed. So I've seen a lot of people at conventions walking away from autograph lines with these really nice, they've brought in a very nice piece, but they haven't thought about its autographability. So first of all, is it going to take an autograph well? Is it going to look good? And secondly, how are you going to display it? So I got Nichelle Nichols, for example, to autograph her book for me years ago. And it's great, but it's sitting on a shelf. You can't see the autograph, right? Whereas an 8x10, you put it on the wall, it looks great. So I always say to people, start with 8x10s. But once you get all the 8x10s that you want, or that you can get from the people who tend to go to conventions or are still with us, well, then what do you do? So for me, I start to think about items that are meaningful. So back to the Ebony magazine, I knew that this was a hugely important thing for her to be featured in that magazine specifically. So I found a really good copy of it on eBay. And this is about 10 years ago. And I brought it to a convention in Toronto, Fan Expo in Toronto. And she had an assistant with her, and her assistant looked at the magazine and said, "Oh, Nichelle's going to love this." And she was talking to another fan, and I was waiting, and then that person left. And the assistant slid it across to Nichelle with a big smile on her face. And Nichelle looked down at the magazine, and she just looked at it for a minute. And then she looked up at me, and then she looked back down at the magazine again. And she told me what I just told you, how important this was to her. And she told me that my copy was much better than her copy of the magazine, just the physical copy. So of course I tried to give it to her. I was saying, well, you take it, like you keep it. She said, oh, no, I couldn't. I said, and I was sincere. I wanted her to have a good copy of her own magazine, but she wouldn't take it. But she signed it, and we had a nice chat. We actually talked for, 5 or 6 minutes while other people waited. And so I spent, whatever, $30 on the magazine, $40 or $50 on the autograph, but it got me a chat with Nichelle Nichols. And that's
nice.
So a Nichelle Nichols autograph in and of itself, a lot of collectors have that. But it's the story behind it, right, that matters. I have, and there is an article on this on my site as well, I have the Heineken ad poster that Leonard Nimoy had to sue Paramount over, or it prompted Leonard Nimoy to sue Paramount over his likeness. And again, I knew the story and I wasn't sure that Nimoy would sign it, but I managed to get a really nice reproduction and again handed it to his assistant. And his assistant looked at it and I said, I don't know if Leonard will sign it. And he said, he said, well, I think he will. And Leonard saw the poster and I said to him, I wasn't sure if you would sign this, or I'm not sure you'll sign this. And he said, sure. He said, why wouldn't I? And I said, well, because of the story. And he kind of gave me a go ahead gesture. And so I told him the story that he knew because he'd written it in the book, I Am Not Spock. And
Right.
and I think he was impressed by the fact that I knew the story. So again, I got a nice 5-minute chat with Leonard Nimoy about that time he sued Paramount. And that article on my site it's the evergreen article. It's the one that, for whatever reason, gets the most traffic and the most consistent traffic. Like people are always reading that. Every month, a bunch of people read that article because I guess they know the story, and because, frankly, the story is usually not told that well. A lot of people get it wrong, but I got it from his book and from him, so the story is correct on my site.
Peter, the M5 tells me that I'm supposed to ask you about a Roddenberry autograph that you didn't know you had. So tell me how this came to pass.
This is one of my favorite moments in collecting, and it happened in the storage room in my basement. I was looking through a bin because I was looking for something specific to write about, and I have storage bins because I can't fit everything in my Star Trek room, and I came across the Star Trek Concordance color book, not coloring book. It should be coloring book. It's called the Color Book, and it's sort of a pamphlet that the people who did the Star Trek Concordance put out of fan artwork. And it had a price on the front. It was $5 or $10. I can't remember right now. On the bag, the price was on the bag. So I hadn't looked at it in a long time. Took it out of the bag, opened it up, and it turns out I had never looked at it. I had picked this up at a convention in a bin because it's a weird old collectible, and I like weird old collectibles. And I had never opened it. I apparently had come home from the convention and put it away and never looked at it because there are 3 autographs in it. There is David Gerrold's autograph with a sketch of some tribbles, DC Fontana's autograph, and Gene Roddenberry's autograph. I had a Gene Roddenberry autograph that I didn't know about. Just amazing. So I had, and I got it for $5 or $10 or whatever the price tag was. So that's the other piece of advice I have is, if you have an extensive collection that, especially if you haven't looked at it in a while, go through your boxes because there's probably stuff there you've forgotten about.
Did you have a Gene Roddenberry autograph before this, or was this your first one? Okay, so you already had.
I already had a Gene. I have a few Gene Roddenberry autographs. I have a memo that he wrote. I have a letter that Gene Roddenberry wrote to his mail carrier that I haven't written about yet. I have his autograph on a couple of convention programs, but this one was a surprise. And there was a 2, Jenny, but Jenny spelled her name in a very odd way. And I was able to track down the woman who owned this originally. She's passed away. But because her spelling of her name was very unusual and because she was a Star Trek fan, I was actually able to find her and trace the origin of this weird little coloring book. Yeah.
So, Peter, one of the things the M5 wants me to ask you about is how you got particularly interested in the Star Trek convention that was held in Canada in the 70s. And you've done a whole amount of research about this convention, and you've published articles about it. You got a whole website devoted to it. Why in the world are we interested in this? Please tell me the story of what's going on here.
Well, okay. It starts with a collectible. So many things.
Oh, of course,
so
it
many
does.
Things.
Of course, it does.
So many things in my life. So again, I was going through a storage box. I thought the irony of the story is I had a short period of time and I wanted to write a post for my main site, my Star Trek collectibles site, and I thought, well, I'll go through some storage boxes and I'll find something I can just do a quick post on. And what I found was years ago, sometime in the 80s, I picked up a convention program from Toronto Star Trek 76. It was the name of the convention, obviously in 1976, in the summer of 1976, right downtown Toronto. And it was signed by Walter Koenig. The program was signed by Walter Koenig, which is why I bought it, sometime in the 80s and put it away. And I flipped through the program. I hadn't looked at it in 20 years, 15 or 20 years. I hadn't looked at this program. And I realized that there was a huge, the guest list for this show in 1976 in Toronto, like not in New York, not in LA, in Toronto, was amazing. Walter Koenig, George Takei, Nichelle Nichols, James Doohan. Basically, it's easier to say of the main cast, everybody except Shatner and Nimoy, plus Grace Lee Whitney, plus a whole bunch of writers, novelists. Just David Gerald was supposed to be there, but he had a medical emergency the day before he was going to leave. DC Fontana was there. Harlan Ellison was there. Anyway, because I view my website as telling the stories behind my collectibles rather than just being a catalog.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say something about them. I went to do research on Toronto Star Trek 76 and found there was almost nothing. There was like online, there was a couple of mentions. There was one page. There's a wonderful site called Fanlore, Fanlore, that has done a wonderful job of collecting a lot of really old Star Trek and other sci-fi materials and remembrances. It's a wonderful site, but they had one page, and not even a very good one, on Toronto Star Trek 76. Otherwise, it had been forgotten, and that bothered me because here's this like massive convention, a guest list that would be impressive today at a major convention in Toronto in 76, and the world seemed to have forgotten about it. So I pulled that program out of the box because I wanted to write a quick couple hours, write a quick piece for my site. Ended up, I spent 3 years on this project. I interviewed more than 20 people. I wrote more than 20 articles, and I created a site just for Toronto Star Trek 76. And as I said, I interviewed more than 20 people. I interviewed the daughter of the woman who created the convention, Deborah Pierce, who created Toronto Star Trek 76, died quite suddenly a number of years ago. But her daughter, who was very instrumental in the convention, lives not too far from me. So I interviewed her a few times. I talked to people who were at the convention. I talked to volunteers who helped run the convention. My favorite story is in looking in the program. One of the on the the convention list, the people running the convention. One of the main people I wanted to talk to was listed as the convention photographer.
Okay.
Because what I heard over and over again from people I was talking to is that there are no photos. There are no photos from the convention. Because again, it's 1976. You don't have a phone in your pocket. Cameras are big, bulky, expensive things. People didn't carry them. So there was no visual record of this great event. So I really wanted to find the photographer, and I couldn't find him. I spent a long time looking for him. I found some other photos. A few other people had a camera with them, and I got in touch with them. I found photos in some newspaper articles and archives. Doing research, the Toronto Library had some photos. But anyway, I finally found the photographer's name is Frank Goodman, and I finally found him. Turns out he was in Toronto the whole time. I should have found him a lot faster than I did.
Yeah.
I went to see him. I emailed him. He got back to me the same day. We had a long conversation on the phone. He invited me to come visit him in Toronto. And so he took these photos in 1976. This was either in 2020 or late 2019 late 2019, I believe, when I finally found him and visited him. And he gave me boxes of negatives, boxes of prints. He gave me discs with digital files on them so many years after the convention. And then he died about 4 months later.
Oh, my goodness.
Just before my website went live. So I interviewed him. I visited him twice. I talked to him on the phone 3 or 4 times. And then he died just before my site went live, a few decades after he had taken these photos. And the thing that's amazing to me about the story is if I had not found him, all of that stuff would have gone in the garbage, because he told me that his family doesn't care about his photography. They had no one was going to preserve this stuff. If I hadn't found him when I did, all of this Star Trek history would have gone to the garbage. So you asked why I did all of this. Because it's Star Trek history, because Star Trek matters to me, because fandom matters to me. And because, like the conversations you and I are having now, I had fantastic conversations with people about how much that convention meant to them.
Mm-hmm.
Talked to one woman who was a teenager in 1976. She begged her parents, she lived in a small town in Ontario, a few hours away from Toronto. She begged her parents to let her go to the convention. And they finally allowed it, but only with certain restrictions. She had to go with a couple of friends. She could stay for the 2 nights in the hotel, but she was not allowed to leave the hotel. And she didn't. I said to her, and like, what'd you do? And she said, I didn't leave the hotel. I told my mom I would not leave that hotel. I did not step foot out of that hotel for the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of the convention. And she said, why would I? Because everything I wanted was there. And what she told me was, coming from a small town in Ontario where nobody understood why she loved Star Trek, to go to a hotel full of people, because there was thousands of people there, it was a big convention, to go to a hotel that was full of people who loved Star Trek meant so much to her. And it is her favorite memory, or one of her favorite memories to this day, that it meant so much to her to be at that convention. So doing this website gave me the gift of that conversation with her about what Star Trek meant to her. And it's one of my favorite things that I've ever done, is that website.
Well, Peter, the M5 tells me it's time to talk about some episodes. Are you game?
Absolutely. Let's do that.
So, Peter, let's talk about the Corbomite Maneuver, a very popular episode of TOS. And this, of course, is the one where we have the Fesarius, we have Baylock, and we have very weird man-baby Clint Howard. Please tell me what's going on with this particular episode for you. Why is it special?
So it's a very good, fun episode just in general. As you said, Clint Howard, I think, is charming as Baylock. I really like some of the interpersonal stuff with, Bailey freaking out because he's everybody else is super competent, right? Everybody else in that episode is experienced, is competent, is calm, is follows orders, and you've got Bailey just losing his crap because he's so freaked out, and Kirk actually has to kick him off the bridge. So there's all that stuff that's great about the episode. I also love the fact, to me, Corbomite Maneuver is the episode that most shows us that this is their workplace. This is like every day they get up and they go to work. And, for us, it's this incredible adventure, wonderful stories, science fiction, this, that. But for them, it's a workplace, as in addition to being all that stuff. So you see them having coffee during a meeting. You see them being tired and bored. You see them, like Uhura, when they have a briefing scene in the briefing room, Uhura's all slumped over. She looks like she's about to fall asleep. She looks annoyed, because that's how people are sometimes at work, right?
Yeah.
So I love the episode because it shows us that this is a workplace and people have to get along with each other and they have conflicts and all that. So all that stuff is great. But to me, my favorite thing about the episode is that the Corbomite Maneuver encapsulates the entire philosophy of Star Trek in a few lines. And it's important to understand, this is the first regular episode that they produced. So they did the two pilots, The Cage and Where No Man.
Mm-hmm.
Corbomite is the very first episode of the regular production. So the Star Trek is very, very new, right? But you could see that they had already figured out something really, really fundamental about Star Trek, even though this is the very beginning of the production. Roddenberry, one assumes, figured out something very, very fundamental. When they finally defeat the enemy, they finally break away from the Fesarius, and in any other story, that would be the end. Everybody would be high-fiving, we won, we beat the enemy. In any other story, it would end there. Kirk orders the ship to turn around and go back. And people, like even Spock, like Kirk says, plot a course for it, Mr. Bailey. And Spock says, for it, Captain? And Kirk basically says, yes, we're going back. And then McCoy's like, Jim, do you think maybe that's not a great idea? And Kirk says, what's the mission of this vessel, Doctor? To seek out and contact alien life and an opportunity to demonstrate what our high-sounding words mean. I get goosebumps saying that line. That is Star Trek in 2 sentences. We're here to contact alien life. We're not here to exploit. We're not here to find mineral resources. We're not here to make money. We're here to contact alien life. And this is an opportunity to demonstrate what our high sounding words mean. That's all of Star Trek right there. And they got it right at the beginning of the production.
The M5 tells me that we have a very strange twofer coming up, so I'm not sure exactly where we're going to go with this. So I guess I'll just put the episode out there, and you could just tell me what we're going to do here. The Way to Eden, and also along with that, the 1988 Shore Leave comic issue 46, which I did read in preparation for this and is insane. Yeah. So please tell me what is going on with this particular twofer, Peter. What's happening here?
We'll do the comic first because that was really just something I shared with you because it's weird and funny. It's a terrible comic. The story sucks.
I can't believe they actually made a comic where a Klingon character shoots a kid in the face with a phaser. When I came across that, I said, what?
Yeah.
And so I guess I should preface this by saying the comic is essentially in the Wrath of Khan type era. With Kirk on board the Enterprise, and they're going for shore leave someplace. Yep. And that's really what the comic is. And there's a Klingon who, in the art, has a very TMP sort of presentation. He has sort of the hair and sort of the ridges that were very much from the beginning of TMP, not so much like Next Generation. So he's got that TMP look, and he's wearing the Monster Maroons, and he's serving on board the Enterprise. And he's recollecting the fact that when he was working as part of the Klingons, he was doing war crimes. And that's why he decided to quit. But I mean, I couldn't believe it when I saw him giving a child a phaser to the face. It was really quite jarring. So I didn't know what we were going to talk about as far as this comic book goes, Peter. So please salvage this for me. I'm struggling over here.
Okay, I don't think I can salvage it. Star Trek comics are a whole other area of collecting and a whole other area of fandom. There are experts on Star Trek comics who impress the heck out of me. There's two people specifically who just are amazing authorities on Star Trek comics. I'm not. But this one, there are 3 stories in this comic. One is, as you say, Klingon war crimes. And it is so negative and so violent and so off-putting. But then it's coupled with the story of McCoy and some of the other crew going sand skiing, and McCoy bounces into a tree and breaks his leg. And so there's like this sort of slapstick comedy end of it. And
he goes full McCoy at the when that happens. He goes full McCoy, as crotchety as ever.
Yeah. And then there's the third story, which is, and this is a single issue of a comic book, so nothing gets a lot of coverage. The third story is that the Federation wants to put an observer. The Starfleet, wants to put an observer aboard the Enterprise, and Kirk objects to this. And he, again, in this sort of weird comical type take, spends the whole comic running away from this guy and hiding so that he doesn't have to let him on board the ship, even though he's a Starfleet representative, even though Kirk could just beam up to the ship and hide there. But anyway, turns out that this officious little sort of Starfleet twit is actually Tongo Rad from the episode The Way to Eden, which is the tie-in. The reason I sent it to you as a tie-in for discussing The Way to Eden, because it amuses.
He's one of the followers of Dr. Severin.
Yeah, one of the followers of Dr. Severin, one of the so-called space hippies, although I object to that term. They're not hippies. They're in space, but they're not hippies. So it's just, because a lot of our conversation centers on collecting because of who I am, I wanted to share with you this very weird Star Trek comic that, as you said, goes from sort of slapstick comedy to sort of a French farce with people hiding behind plants and stuff, to a Klingon being ordered to shoot a young child point blank and actually doing it. What a weird ride. Like just a weird ride.
What really got me is that it kind of goes, the way the comic is laid out is he's got the kid and you're not sure if he's going to do it. And then like right at the moment he's about to pull the trigger, you got to flip 2 pages ahead. So like, you don't really know until you flip, like, did he like shoot in the sky? Did he shoot the officer? you turn over, you're like, oh wow, he actually did it.
He shot the kid.
Yeah, he shot the kid. I mean, that really just I was like, wow, I don't know how this conversation's going to go.
I should say for listeners who are of course now dying to read this comic, this is DC January '88 issue 46. The story's called Getaway. If you really want to track that one down,
it's wild. It's wild. Let's talk about an Enterprise twofer. Let's talk about the human purity people in Star Trek Enterprise Season 4, Demons and Terra Prime, where, of course, we have the wonderful Peter Weller, who is trying to evict all aliens from Earth. So tell me what's going on with this one.
Listen, this is, first of all, it's from Enterprise, and I think Enterprise doesn't get enough love. I really like Enterprise. Not perfect, but I like what they were trying to do. And I think the look of Enterprise is excellent. I think it does look like it takes place, for the most part, before the original series. I love Doug Drexler's design of the NX-01 Archer ship. It's my second favorite ship after Matt Jeffries' Enterprise. So, first of all, I just think that Enterprise doesn't get enough love. The second thing is, Demons and Terra Prime is a 2-part episode towards the end of the series. In fact, right at the end of the series. It should have been the series finale. Unfortunately, they did All Good Things. Not All Good Things.
These are the Voyages.
Sorry, These Are the Voyages. Thank you. Yeah. Unfortunately, they did that episode. And Demons and Terra Prime tackles an issue that is incredibly important today, incredibly important then, I would say even more so now, because science fiction, of course, is very good at predicting the future and also warning about it. TOS did that all the time. You have the Ultimate Computer and you have the Trouble with Tribbles as a comedic take on invasive species. You've got the Mark of Gideon about overpopulation. What Enterprise was doing was talking about the people who are isolationists and who blame the other for every problem that they see in society. So people who blame immigrants, people who create hate between religions, people who get upset about gender and sexual orientation. These people like that, they want to be isolationist. They want to take society back to a perceived previous time when things were better. And that's literally what the episode is about. And it's that impulse that I think a lot of people have is the opposite of what Star Trek is. Star Trek literally says outright in a very obvious way, we're all equal, we're all valuable, and that diversity creates strength, right? In 1968, we had the IDIC, the IDIC, in the original series, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. And this idea, of course, continued through the DNA of Star Trek. It's in The Measure of a Man, it's in The Drumhead, it's in a lot of episodes, but Enterprise really tackled it, I think, head on. They said, this is something we need to talk about because we need to warn people that these insidious forces exist. And I just think it was a really powerful episode. Also, sorry, one more thing. I know I talked too much.
Sure.
One more thing. It's the beginning of the Federation. So what we see in that episode is the very first movement that would eventually become the Federation. You see the founding races of the Federation having a meeting. And that's where Enterprise would have gone. Had it had a 5th season, they were going to talk about the founding of the Federation and maybe the Romulan War that is referenced in Balance of Terror. And I would have loved to have seen that.
So we've talked a little bit about the comic, but I think there's more to say, the M5 is telling me, about the actual episode, The Way to Eden. So why don't you give me your thoughts about that one, Peter?
Yeah, no, I suggested that we talk about this because The Way to Eden is often mentioned as the worst episode or one of the worst episodes of Star Trek. And similarly to my feeling about Spock's brain, not at all the worst episode of the original series, I actually quite like The Way to Eden. And so I sort of feel a need to defend it. It is not a good episode. I'm not suggesting it's a good episode. I'm not pretending it's a good episode. But to me, it is a much better episode than people remember. And it's way darker than people tend to view it, right? Like The Way to Eden, because of the bouncy, silly music and the bouncy, silly costumes, that's what people take away from it. And that's really all they remember. But it's actually, the story itself is about it's a warning, like a lot of Star Trek, like a lot of science fiction. It's a warning in this case about sort of messianic figures and the cults that they build around themselves. And Severin, the leader of the group, which I refuse to call space hippies, Severin is a much darker villain than Star Trek usually portrays. Like, people think about Khan, and yeah, Khan was a bad guy, and he was going to kill Kirk in the decompression chamber, and then he was going to send Spock into the decompression chamber. But what he said was, each of you will go in there until I get what I want, one at a time. And that's terrible. But what Severin decided was to straight up slaughter everybody aboard the ship because he wanted a ride to a planet. He had no noble or important or life changing goal other than, I really want to go to this planet, and I'm willing to kill everybody aboard this ship in order to get there. That's incredibly dark for Star Trek. But what makes it worse is he had all these followers, well, 5 of them, all of these followers, who, six followers plus him, 5 plus him, who were all willing to do this. Like, when he decides towards the end to use sound against the crew, they say this will kill them. And he basically says, yeah, you're right, but we're not going to worry about that. And they all go, oh, okay. And this group of people just decides to slaughter everybody aboard the ship. And again, the episode to me is not about the costumes and the songs. It's about the warning of cult leaders that there are these people among us who are very, very dangerous. And that's what Star Trek should do. That's what science fiction should do. It should warn us. It should hold up a flag and say, hey, this kind of thing can happen and you need to be aware of it. And I love that Star Trek did that. The other thing I will say is, for people who don't like this side, the way to Eden, totally get it. You don't have to like it. But if you really want to dislike it for the ending, which is terrible, because at the very end of the episode, after they've tried to kill everybody, Chekhov hugs his ex-girlfriend, Irina, and gives her a nice little kiss on the bridge, and everything is fine with the two of them. And then Kirk says to Chekhov, you did what you had to do, as did we all, even your friends. That's a ridiculous statement. That's Kirk going, yeah, okay, so I get that you guys were going to kill us all, but I guess you had to do that, and it's okay. The end of the episode, if you want to hate the way to Eden, hate it for the end. But I think the message is still there, and I just want to put out into the Star Trek world that this is actually a better episode than you remember, and maybe give it a watch, because you probably haven't seen it in a long time. That's about it.
During this discussion, you said The Way to Eden, not the worst Star Trek episode. You said Spock's Brain, not the worst Star Trek episode. So I feel like I got to call you to account here, Peter. Do you want to register an opinion as to what is the worst Star Trek episode? Because I can't leave that hanging.
Your podcast strikes me mostly being about positivity, so I wasn't going to go there. But since you asked, I think the worst episode of the original series is the Omega Glory. Not because, I mean, it is totally silly that this planet not only has the word for word Declaration of Independence. No, preamble to the Constitution. Sorry, preamble to the Constitution. Right? Yeah. Yep. Not only that they have it word for word, but it's also in the same calligraphy as the original document. I mean, that's clearly ridiculous. That's pushing the similar worlds concept way beyond the breaking point. That's the concept we see in Miri and other episodes that was done to save money. Roddenberry's original pitch document talked about that they could save money by using a similar worlds concept, but to have the text word for word in the same calligraphy is clearly just silly. But more than that, I don't like seeing a Federation starship captain as a mass murderer, as somebody who's literally committing genocide. He says, we drained 4 phasers and they kept coming. He admits to killing thousands of people. So not only does he ignore the Prime Directive, but he goes and kills a whole thousands and thousands of people to do it. And it just, I don't see, again, as I said earlier, Star Trek to me is about optimism. It's about an optimistic view of the future. And while people can be imperfect, he's not someone who is shown as suffering from a breakdown, or like there's no justification for what he did. He just decides that he wants something and he's willing to kill thousands of people for it. And he's a starship captain, one of 12 or 13, depending on how you read the line from Kirk, one of 12 or 13 in the entire Federation. And he just does this terrible thing. And I hate the episode for that reason. Also, just, it's just lazy storytelling, the combs and it's all just lazy storytelling. So that, to me, because it is the opposite of the Star Trek philosophy. That's why that's the worst episode.
Star Trek Prodigy, All the World is a Stage. So this, of course, is the one where we have the Ender Prisians, and we have the legacy of Mr. Garavik from the TOS episode Obsession, who ends up visiting this planet and basically contaminating this culture in the worst possible way, or maybe the best possible way. I don't know. It depends on what you want to say about it. So tell me what's going on with this particular episode for you, Peter.
Yeah, and this will be a shorter answer because Prodigy's not for me. I watched it because, as I said, I watch every episode of Star Trek, but I'm not the intended audience, and I don't love the show in and of itself, but I do like what they're trying to do. What they're trying to do is widen the appeal. If you can get young people watching Star Trek as a cartoon, then maybe they'll watch it as a live action. Now, I think young kids can handle quote unquote real Star Trek, but I still like what Prodigy is doing. This episode I thought was very clever. It's basically a take on Piece of the Action. It's the same idea of this cultural contamination. It's very funny. All the World's a Stage. The Prodigy episode is very funny, and it is certainly one that watching that episode got me more upset about the potential cancellation of Prodigy, or the whatever's going to happen with Prodigy. Paramount basically dumping it.
Right. We don't know what's going to happen as of the date we're recording.
Correct. This. Yeah, that's correct. But you can really see that the people who made Prodigy are trying to do something interesting. They're not just telling silly stories, even though it is also a silly story.
Well, all I'll say about that episode is live logs and proper.
Exactly. That's just funny. That's just good comedy right there.
Peter, you have spent a lifetime as a Star Trek fan. You have spent a vast quantity of money. I didn't even ask you to try to calculate what your whole collection might be worth because you said you don't sell stuff. So I imagine you don't calculate that stuff out. But you have a massive collection. And we've seen all the work you've put into your website, documenting your collection and all the stories around it, putting together the website around the Star Trek convention in '76 that was in Toronto. Obviously, Star Trek's a big part of your life. Why does Star Trek matter to you?
It's a great question. And Roddenberry got asked a variation on that for decades. The actors, the original series actors, got asked a variation of that question for decades. Like, why does this still matter? Why has this endured? Why do people love it? One of the answers, and I think it's the aspect that tends to not get discussed as much, one of the answers to that question is because it's great drama. Like, we like stories. We like a good, compelling story with a message, well told, well presented, acting, writing, whatever. Throughout history, we're a storytelling species. We learn about life through stories. So Star Trek is great drama told well. And that, I think, is a big reason that it's succeeded. And people tend to talk about the philosophy and all that, which I'm about to do, but it's important to acknowledge Star Trek is successful because it's very high quality storytelling. The second reason, of course, that it endures is because it is an optimistic view of the future. You talk often on your podcast, and I entirely agree with you, that if you like Star Trek, you like Star Trek. All you have to do is decide you like it. I don't get to tell you what to like, what not to like, and all. That whole gatekeeping thing can be very toxic. For me, the sine qua non, the without this there is nothing of Star Trek is optimism. If what you're presenting is not an overall optimistic view of the future, to me, that's not Star Trek. Doesn't mean you can't have some bad things that happen. I mean, DS9 had the Dominion War. So yeah, sure, some bad things can happen, but overall, you are presenting and advocating an optimistic view of the future. And if you're not doing that, it's not Star Trek, which gives me some problems with some really, some current Star Trek. As we're recording this, a lot of the optimism, in my opinion, has been lost. or de-emphasized. But I think there is a ton of great dystopian fiction out there. Like, I love The Walking Dead and The Handmaid's Tale and all of that wonderful, wonderful dystopian fiction. There's a ton of it out there. We don't need Star Trek to be dystopian. We need Star Trek to be optimistic. And I think that's one of the big reasons it's been so successful.
Well, Peter, I've had a great time in our interview today, but the M5 is signaling me that it is now time for the Kobayashi Maru. The Kobayashi Maru is a challenging and difficult test, cunningly prepared by the M5 just for you. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our little program. Are you ready to face the Kobayashi Maru, Peter?
I am prepared.
M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulation and prepare to record Peter's responses.
Simulation loaded and ready.
Who's chasing you on the Shore Leave planet? A samurai, Finnegan, or Don Juan?
Finnegan, for sure.
Who's worse, Leonor Caridian, Yarnek the Excalbion, or the Gorgon from And the Children Shall Lead?
The Gorgon.
You can visit one of these three locations from the original 1701. What's it going to be? The Shuttlecraft Bay, the Rec Room, or the Phaser Control Room?
The Rec Room.
Which place would be worse to visit? Sigma Iosha 2 from A Piece of the Action, Omega 4 from the Omega Glory, or Pollux 4, Home of Apollo?
Omega 4.
What are we going to study next? Berthold rays, Deniven flying parasites, or the giant space amoeba?
Giant space amoeba.
Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analysis underway.
Peter, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has calculated that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations.
Well, I changed the rules of the test, of course, but go ahead.
Of course. And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of our program. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Peter is awarded the title of Curator of Amusing Antiquities at Ethan Prime.
So there you go.
That is the honor of my life, John.
If that's the honor of your life, I'm sorry. It's I don't think you can. I think you got a long road ahead of you. So Peter, why don't you tell people how they can get in touch with you, where they can find photos of your collection, where they can take you to task for all of your opinions on Star Trek?
Listen, especially to take me to task. I have two websites, and I actively encourage people to contact me, and if they disagree with something I've written, or I've missed something, or I've made a mistake. So the first site is collectingtrek.ca. One word, collectingtrek.ca. That's my main website. I tell the stories behind the collectibles. There's lots of photos, and I'm told by people that there's a lot of information that they'd never heard before. My other website is Toronto Star Trek 76.ca. The 76 is the digits, 76, and Toronto Star Trek 76 is the name of the convention. You can type that in to a web search engine and you'll get my site, because there really isn't any other information on it. My site is the definitive story of the first and the best Star Trek convention ever held in Canada.
And we, of course, will have links to all of that, along with photos and a couple of other little goodies that Peter has sent me up on the show notes page up at TrekProfiles.com. So you can always go there to find links to all the things that Peter has talked about. Peter, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
I'm thrilled to have been here, and I know that you have a rule about people not being guests again, which I totally get. But honestly, I could have sent you 3 or 4, 10 lists of topics to talk about. So this has been great. Thank you for inviting me.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you that you may send us your best wishes, your worst takes, or selfie videos of yourself eating gourmet-gander kebabs to feedback at TrekProfiles.com, or on Facebook or Twitter at Trek Profiles, or Blue Sky 2. Anything you send us may be used in the show, or it may be sent directly to Vagra 2 to hang out with Armus. This time, I leave you with a quote from Mr. Chekhov, who said in the episode The Way to Eden, quote, "I am proud of what I am. I believe in what I do. Can you say that?" Close quote. No, I wasn't going to do the Russian accent for you. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
Hey, it's a pleasure to meet you, Peter. Thank you for agreeing to come on. I'm always interested in talking to many different kinds of Star Trek fans, and it's really awesome to talk to someone that has collecting as a really big thing. I haven't had a lot of big collectors on, so that's kind of a thrill for me.
I've noticed that. I've listened to a number of your podcasts. You've done 70 something, if I'm correct. And
yeah, 79.
Yeah, and I've listened to, I would guess, about 15.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed there aren't a lot of collectors. There's people who have, like, oh, I have these few things, and I have these few things. But someone like me, where collecting is like a really big part of it, I don't know that you've had a lot of those.
Wow, we got a lot of Star Trek stuff in the background there. Wow, look at that. Look at those posters. That's great.
Yeah, I'd love to actually show you around, but I'd have to unplug the microphone and unplug the headphones and all that. But I've got a whole 360 Star Trek room here.
When Star Trek breaks out of the screen and makes something happen in the real world.
Okay.
So, collecting things is certainly part of it. And we've talked to people that, made life choices based on Star Trek, or, made a significant decision based upon Star Trek, or anytime something is happening in the real world because of Star Trek, that's what we want to get to.
I actually have to tell you, I was blown away. I think it's the last one you posted, might be the one before that, was Stephanie.
Oh, yeah.
Who talked about being a COVID nurse and just trying, working so hard to become a nurse, even though she had no support, and what Star Trek meant to her in that journey. That was a remarkable interview. And I have nothing to say that approaches that. I mean, I was so impressed by her and by her honesty, and by what she had to say about Star Trek. That was a remarkable interview. It really was.
And then you get awarded your honorary Star Trek title on behalf of the show, and then we're done. Do you have any questions for me?
I have a few things, I guess. Very briefly, though. First is, this is your podcast. So like I would imagine, I'm not a podcaster, I would imagine some people later get annoyed maybe because you didn't include something, or, they thought this was, you mentioned you edit this. Of course you do. This is your podcast. You won't hear me. I'm not going to contact you later and say, why the hell didn't you talk about this and that? Your podcast, you do what you want with it. Once I hang up, this is all yours. I don't know if I need to say that, but I do wonder if you get some pushback from people. I wanted to say too that I really like your show, and I've listened to a lot of podcasts over the years. I'm a podcast listener, Star Trek podcast listener from way back. There was a British show, and I think it was called Make It So, that is, I think, the earliest. It's either the earliest Star Trek podcast or the earliest sort of like ongoing long-term Star Trek podcast. And that was like whenever podcasts were brand new, because I remember them like explaining to people what podcasts were. So anyway, right? Yeah,
2005, 2006 is right about when it got to be a thing.
I was going to say about 20 years ago, so that's about right. And a lot of podcasts are not great. Just it's a skill. Podcasting is a skill. Interviewing is a skill. I spent most of my professional career as a magazine editor. I've conducted, I don't know, at least hundreds, if not thousands of interviews. And you're a good interviewer. And I wanted to make sure I wanted to make sure I told you that, because a lot of times if I'm listening to a podcast that has a guest, I'm always thinking, ask this question. And very often they don't. So it's nice to listen to a podcast where where the host is a good interviewer, and you are. And I wanted to mention that. So that's why I'm doing this, is because, I mean, I like to talk Star Trek, obviously, but I really like what you do. And I just wanted to say that.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So let me address your earlier point, which is when I say I edit heavily, really I edit for quality, not for content. So usually the only content that'll be cut out is if, like, for example, somebody is talking to me and they say, well, I don't want this out there, but I've just, I'm applying for a new job or something,
okay.
Like that's like privileged information. Okay. the stuff that I cut is people doing things like when they lick their lips, or they're making mouth noises, or things like that. Like I go through word for word and I cut that stuff. And so it's editing for audio quality. By and large, the majority of content that I record goes in the episode.
Okay.
There's very little that's not in there. Like the other big exception I would say is when we just talk about stuff that is more of interest, I think, like to me and the guest, and I just don't think anyone else would care about it. And that's usually like we go on a big diatribe about something that I feel like we've talked about on the show before. So like I've talked about like my feelings about Star Trek canon.
Right.
I've gone through that discussion. Yeah, I've gone through that discussion like 10 times already, you know, and if you didn't know about it, you know, we may talk about it for a minute, but I don't think my listeners need to hear me say that again. That's the stuff that gets cut.
I don't entirely agree with you, by the way.
It's okay. It's okay. I mean, it's just the thing is, I think that the showrunners agree with me. And that's the problem, right? Is that I don't think that they are trying to be consistent. It's like a nice to have, you know, as they say in New Orleans, it's lagniappe, something extra. It's not anything they feel the need to concern themselves with if they want to tell a story. So Into Darkness, you can have, you know, Khan beaming all the way to Kronos from, you know, Earth, and it's just how they're going to do it. And they just don't worry about that stuff. Right. So I have tried to let go of those things because I was one of those people that had all the books and, you know, all the technical manuals and like, you know, trying to figure out how the phasers work and stuff like that. And I'm like, you know, I get the feeling that the people who wrote this don't know as much about this stuff as I do. You know, and I don't know as much as a lot of other people, but I mean, I really got into that stuff. And, you know, I am very certain that I knew more than some of the people who are writing the show. And there's people who know way more than me. You probably do. And I just knew that it wasn't something they were really concerned with. And if you try to figure out like how many days at what warp speed does it take to get from Earth to Vulcan, the next episode, they're not going to care about that. And so I feel that it's really almost folly to try to keep track of that stuff. You know what I mean? And to try to make it all make sense. It's because it's just insanity. That's my take on it. You know, they're just going to keep making stuff up as they go. And as they make more Star Trek, stuff is going to make less and less sense. And I don't even think in the original show they were trying to make sense of things. Even if you just look at the only three, you know, the three original seasons. I mean, how many episodes were there where, you know, they could have gotten into a shuttlecraft and solved the whole thing, right? But like, we didn't have the shuttlecraft.
Yeah, that's right. They didn't have the set build yet. So I very much agree with you in terms of, I mean, the warp speed is an excellent example. Sometimes it takes a day to get somewhere that even like if you do the math, it would take 6 months, even at high warp speed. That kind of stuff, no. But like in Star Trek, I just did the table thing. In Star Trek First Contact, for example, right? The character of Cochrane is so radically different from what we saw in the TV show that it took me right out of the movie. Right. The first time I saw that movie, I spent the first, you know, once he appears on screen, I spent a long time thinking, but that's not Cochrane. And it just really took me out of the movie, you know?
Yeah.
Or in, I think it's Into Darkness where they do the Khan ripoff, you know, where the JJ verse does the Khan ripoff. And again, took me right out of the movie. So things like that is where I think continuity matters. I love Strange New Worlds. Strange New Worlds is fantastic Star Trek. I don't love the Gorn just because it's so radically different. And the only way to make that work is to assume that the Gorn that Kirk fought was like the equivalent of a 120-year-old, you know, human, and, you know, just why he moves so slowly and all that. So that's the continuity bit that throws me, is when it takes me out of the story. Because Kirk and Spock had clearly never encountered a Gorn when we see, you know, during the episode Arena, they clearly had never encountered a Gorn, had never heard of a Gorn. That's the continuity that throws me. I don't care about warp speeds, or star dates are another one that are, you know, classically all over the place, right?
No, I'd agree with you on all of that.
Right.
All right. I'd agree. You know, there's some stuff that doesn't bother me too much that some people get wrapped around the axle about. Like, for instance, in Discovery, there's a tribble in the background,
Yep.
like a stuffed tribble, in the background. Like, okay, Lorca knew what tribbles were. That doesn't mean that everybody everywhere knows what tribbles are, right? I mean, that stuff I don't like. I am completely satisfied with
Okay.
that.
Okay. I can see that.
But then, there's times they do stuff that just change stuff up, and it's like it's not going to stop. You're not going to get a showrunner who's going to be like, we are going to rigorously stick to all the previously established things. They're just not going to do it. And so I've come to the conclusion that, like, for my own sanity, I'm just not going to try to care too much anymore. And so I've taken to looking at Star Trek a little bit as more of, and this is sort of an IT reference, not that I work in IT, but I'm familiar with this reference, as more of a development platform.
Yep.
It has like these things that you can pick up and use.
That's a good analogy.
That there's this concept of the Federation, there's this concept of Starfleet, but even like when you look at the show is not even consistent within itself. I was just thinking about this the other day. When there's one episode, I believe it's the Apple, Kirk asks Spock how much money was invested in his training.
Yeah.
And Spock's about to give an answer, then he cuts him off, right? And, was going to do a Spock thing. He was going to give the exact number, right? Down to the, the Quatlu or whatever. And then you got Mudd's Women, where, Harry Mudd is straight up selling women. Straight up slavery, right? What's he selling? He's not giving them away. Right? You got Cyrano Jones like doing his thing, right? Trying to sell spike and flame gems or whatever. I mean, if you try to figure out like how the economy works, it's insanity. There's no, and they're like, oh, it's luxury space communism. No, it's not, because we've seen the exact opposite of that in the show. And I'm not saying it's a capitalist utopia either, but I'm just saying it's not something the show has felt the need to explain really well. And they just kind of, they hand wavy it. It's all hand wavy. There's some stuff happening over there.
It's an excellent example. My workaround for myself for the economy is that there's within the Federation, you don't use money. So you don't need money to get a chicken salad. Get a chicken sandwich and coffee out of the replicator. That's not deducted from your wages. So within Starfleet, within Starfleet, they don't use money. But then clearly, outside of when they're interacting with non-Starfleet people, because, for example, in The Trouble with Tribbles, he has a price for a tribble, and Uhura is about to buy one. She basically says, "Sell me a tribble," and he's like, "No, I'm not going to sell you one. This one I'm giving to you." Well, how could she buy that tribble? How many credits? Why does she have any credits? So, and then of course Quark's bar is a whole other one, because that's literally,
makes no
the
sense.
Starfleet people interacting on a daily basis with the local capitalist, as you say. It doesn't make any sense. So it's like Starfleet to Starfleet, there's no currency. Starfleet to outside people, they have to have some money. That's the only way it makes sense. And even then, it doesn't really make sense, right?
Well, we know that Kirk sold his house in Generations. Yep. He talks about this, right? So who did he sell it to, and how much did he get for it? Like that's the question that naturally follows.
Yep.
And the other thing I want to explain, people have to explain to me, is how Picard still owns that winery. How does all of that actually work, right? Because when people say, especially when they tell me, oh, it's space communism, it's like he owns property. He is literally the guy owning property. He is the bourgeoisie. Right. I mean, he's owning the means of production, right? So I don't think that the Star Trek has never written the check that a lot of fans are trying to cash. Right. Is basically what I'm trying to say. Right. That's where I come down on it. And so I'm just like, you know what? I want the moral and ethical dilemmas. Yep. I want the really intricate stories. I want, a little bit of the philosophy. I want, to see just really wild space stuff, meeting really weird creatures and learning about them, I mean, give me the next iteration of the Horta, in Strange New Worlds or whatever. I'm all for that. But this other stuff, I just can't do it. And you know where this comes from? I don't know if you've ever been on Reddit at all, but there's a subreddit called Daystrom Institute.
Okay.
And it is literally nothing but thousands of extremely hardcore Star Trek nerds trying to reconcile this stuff.
Okay.
and someone will go in there and they'll be like, I have a complete explanation that, fully explains the Gorn after Strange New Worlds. And like, it's literally just a fanfic, about, okay, well, there's like these different life stages and, and here's how it works and all this. And it's like, guys, like, I'm going to tell you, the showrunner's not reading this to see how this stuff is going to work. But I appreciate your efforts in trying to, it's a fun exercise. Just don't take it too seriously.
As long as it's fun, because it can ruin it for you, right? If you get too deep in this, you don't have any more fun with it. I don't even mind the depiction of the Gorn. I don't like the existence of the Gorn before Arena, because they're a starfaring race and potentially an enemy. Kirk would know about them. Like, your point about the Tribble in Discovery, I can live with that. There's a lot of things in Discovery that I think are more problematic than the Tribble. I can live with that because it's one creature. And maybe Lorca encountered one and picked it up, like, whatever. But the Gorn are a starfaring, apparently aggressive race. No, not apparently, an aggressive race. They go and wipe out an outpost, and they have a good reason to their way of thinking, but they kill a whole lot of people, out of the blue.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So they're an aggressive starfaring race. Kirk would know about the if Strange New Worlds is correct, Kirk would know about the Gorn. Anyway, we should move on, but.
Yes,
but you got me thinking about canon, listening to your comments about canon, which is one of the reasons you listen to a podcast, is to encounter other people's opinions on stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that enables me to do this show, and I've talked about this before, is that I never feel the need to try to convince people that I'm right, or that you have to like Star Trek the way I like it, or care about it the way I care about it. You can like whatever you like,
right.
And at times, some of my listeners, they tell me like they want less of that, like that guy was not a Star Trek fan, or this person was terrible, And it's like, guys, that's not what we're doing here.
I'm with you.
I think I have a TMP Klingon glass.
Yes.
Somewhere, like from Burger King or someplace.
Yeah.
I
think it was McDonald's had the TMP license, so
okay. So maybe it was McDonald's.
Yeah. I don't own that. I own the Dr. Pepper. I'm looking at the Dr. Pepper animated set right now of 4 glasses. I've got the set of from Star Trek 3. I think that's Burger King. I could be wrong. I have that set. But of course I never use them for drinking out of.
Of course. That's wild. So I'll tell you a little story, actually.
Please do.
I just got one thing I added to my collection, and I am not a collector. I am not interested in a lot of stuff. But I don't know if you've been following the latest with Star Trek Prodigy, but how they've removed it from the streaming service.
Of course.
Right? I got so mad that I decided I was going to do my own part in preserving Star Trek. So I actually have something right here, which is unusual. It's only on my desk because I haven't put it away yet. An original printing of Killing
with the
Time.
embossed cover.
So it's the original one, and it has the correct stuff in it, about the playing with lipstick and dolls and all that stuff. So I got in an eBay battle to win this.
I do not have that one. Mine is the original. Mine is the second edition flat cover. But there's a wonderful article. Someone on the internet spent a whole lot of time going through page by page and has annotated all the differences between those two versions.
So, okay, I'm glad you bring this up, because this is not the embossed cover.
Oh.
But when you go to that guy's site, he's like, look on this page. Does it talk about lipstick and dolls? Look on this page. Does it talk about this? This book has all that. And so I don't know what this is, but when I go in the front, right, it has the right copyright that he has. It has original publication, but it has all the stuff that supposedly is in the original printing. So they said this is the particular ISBN you have to look for, all that stuff. So this has all of that, but it doesn't have the embossed cover. Very strange.
Okay. So there's 3 versions of it.
So it must be.
There's the version with the embossed, there's a version with the flat cover, but the original text, and then there's a version with the flat cover and the edited text.
Right. This does not have the edited text. It has the original text. And I'm holding it in my hands, and I have looked up all the stuff to make sure that this is the correct thing.
I love that.
So there you go.
I love that. And I love that you know the story and that I know the story. I know that I don't have it. You know that you do. I love talking to knowledgeable Star Trek fans.
Oh, well, thank you, but you're stuck with me. So we're going to have to do the best
Sure.
we can. Yeah. And behind me, you can see some of the other stuff
Yeah.
I got, but this is all, Star Trek stamps, Royal Mail, Star Trek stamps. This is the Spock art. I don't know if you've ever seen that before.
I've heard you talk about that.
Yeah, that's from Leonard's own shop. And that's, it's not really a Star Trek collectible. That's Klingon Chef from Deep Space Nine. Lee Sargent, who is the artist, he dared me to sing Klingon opera on Twitter. And so I was like, dude, you don't know me, but I'm going to do that. And so I recorded myself singing Klingon opera very badly. And he sent me that. And I'm looking at it. I can't show it to you because I can't disconnect all this. But one of my favorite things that I own is the original Bob Peak artwork from Motion Picture.
Really? The poster?
With the correct placement of Kirk and Spock.
Right.
So it doesn't have the text on the bottom, like where it's like, directed by, it doesn't have the text. It's literally just the art.
Right.
And Bob Peak's studio, I mean, he's long past, but his studio was sold a run of 200 or 500 of these. And so I got that. So that's what's hanging up. That's what I'm looking at right now. And it makes a great backdrop because behind me, this is my work computer. Okay. So when I'm at work and I'm on a Zoom call or something, like that's what people are looking at. And it's a really nice background because it's got a lot of color, so it's really nice. So
anyway, you're a bit of a collector.
We're not here to talk
you're a bit because the pride and the joy you just described, that you're a little bit of a collector.
See, but like, I don't know, you could fit all the Star Trek stuff I own sincerely into like two like tubs, like two little bins, I mean, except for this poster, which is huge and it's mounted, but like I also have the Franklin Mint original Enterprise Romulan ship and Klingon ship. So, those I have, cause why would you not have those? So I got those. But I have a lot of like stuff I bought at conventions in the 70s and 80s. Like there was this period of time, and I don't know what this was about, but there was this period of time where people were making these weird, like in-universe Federation books, like the Federation Cookbook, the Starfleet Officer's Manual. Yeah, all that stuff, like all the FASA stuff, which I played as a kid. I have all the Enterprise deck plans, the D7 deck plans that were made by FASA. Yep. I have the original role-playing game. I have the whole role-playing game kit, the FASA version. I used to have the Starship Combat game, but I think I lost that. I think I lost that somewhere along the way. But I don't actually have that much. And I'm very rarely going out and buying stuff. I will say this, though. I don't know if you saw these videos. Did you see the ones where me opening the random bags?
From Vegas, yeah.
From Vegas, yeah. So those were just for fun, and that stuff I give away for the most part. I might keep that Terry Farrell photo, but the rest of that I'm going to give it away as prizes for listeners.
You seemed excited about the Terry Farrell photo.
Well, I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. I like Terry Farrell, although not my favorite Dax. I like Ezri better, which is heresy, for a lot of people. But all right, so okay. Great answers there, Peter. Great answers.
Yeah, well, the giant space amoeba, I mean, God, that thing is interesting, and we never find out anything about it,
No, it's just there. It's just one of those things,
and then it's not.
That's right. Boom diggity, we're done. Was that a good experience for you?
I love talking Star Trek. As I said, you're a good interviewer.